Hey everyone and welcome to Storytime. My name is Jake and today we are going to be looking at the subreddit r/prorevenge, where people tell us their best stories on how they got revenge on someone or something they didn't like. I'm actually going to be trying something new today, so if you look in the top right of your screen, you'll see a little poll. So if you just want to click that and vote on that, then that'll be greatly appreciated. But for now, let's sit back, relax and enjoy some pro-revenge. My aunt is a jerk, but gets her just desserts in the end. Back in the late 1980s, my mother, Nancy, was diagnosed with a degenerate neurological condition. My father was working long hours to put a roof over our heads and keep my mum seeing the best doctors. And eventually, my parents realised that with two small kids and a body that was slowly but surely shutting down on her, she needed more help. We had an au pair for a while, but it wasn't a great fit. There was talk of hiring a nursing company to provide in-home care, but my mum's sister, Linda, was graciously offered to let us, my mum, my sister and me, come live with their family, and that she would be happy to take care of her little sister. After a few months of working out the details, my parents and my aunt and uncle agreed to the following. My dad would pay for construction of a large addition onto my aunt and uncle's home. This would be a fully separate home with 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a living room, kitchen, and an unfinished basement. My aunt, who was unemployed, would be the primary caretaker for my mum for the foreseeable future. My aunt claimed that she'd care for her until one of us dies, but I think we all expected it would be more like 10 or 15 years. My mum would have the living rights to the addition until her death. Upon my mother's death, our claim to the addition would be relinquished and my aunt and uncle would own it outright. In 1990, my mum, my sister and I moved 3 hours away to live with my aunt and her family. My dad stayed behind to continue working, and this separation did eventually result in a mostly friendly divorce. Things went well enough at first, and within 6 or 8 months, the addition was built and we moved out of their spare room and into our new home. It would be a lie to say it was massive, but it more than doubled the size of their house. We had our own exterior doors, our own heating and cooling, most every utility. Electricity and plumbing were shared, but I think that was about it. For the first 18 months or so, my aunt mostly held up her end of the bargain, but soon after, the cracks started to form. My uncle left my aunt in early 1991. Linda started getting lazy with my mum, and consequently, her health was suffering. So my dad hired a home nursing outfit to come in and care for her. Linda took this as permission to stop helping with anything at all. Mum soon became bedridden. Not my aunt's fault, the disease is terrible, and couldn't leave the home, so Linda would do mum's shopping for her, but started buying more than just Christmas presents or our groceries. A little at first, then a lot. Eventually, my mum's credit card bills really caught my dad's notice. All told, we calculated she had run up about $20,000 in purchases that were for either her or her kids. This was in the early 1990s. According to the inflation calculator I just looked at, that's the equivalent of about $40,000 now. My dad was working 70-hour weeks for the overtime so he could cover his own mortgage, repaying his $401,000 for the loan he took out to build the addition, and these massive credit card bills. By late 1993, there was a confrontation. My dad cancelled the credit cards and said, "You are spending me dry. I can't have surprise bills like these anymore." And my aunt in turn said, "Get out of my house." Since it was an addition and not technically a separate home, and since my dad didn't have the money for an expensive legal battle, there was little we could do. Living rights be damned. Right at that same time, the house went into foreclosure. Linda had stopped paying the mortgage 6 or so months before. I'm fuzzy on this number, but it's in the ballpark. And the bank foreclosed. Linda didn't have the money to get current on the mortgage. My dad began making plans to buy the mortgage from the bank and take ownership of the whole property. Things were looking good on this front, and he told us we'd be able to stay in our home. By this point, I was 12 years old and had a lot of friends, so I really did not want to move. His plan was that he would charge Linda a fair rent for half of the house. We would continue to live in our house, and the door that connected the two halves would be forever locked, sort of like a duplex. It's at this point that I need to introduce the last character to the story, whom I will call Maria. Maria was the first wife of my mum's and Linda's older brother. They had been married for a short time in the 1970s, and Maria became very close with her new sisters-in-law. After she split from my uncle, she remained very friendly with both Linda's family and mine, and growing up, I called her Aunt Maria. Anyway, Linda now knows that my dad is planning on buying the house from the bank, and she panics. Makes sense, losing your home is scary. She calls anyone she can think of that will give her the money to get a current on the mortgage, and Maria finally comes through and says, "Yeah, of course I'll help you out." Linda calls my dad and gloats that she's not losing her house, and reiterates that my mum, my sister and I can move right out. My dad calls Maria and tries to convince her not to swoop in and save Linda's bacon. "A move is going to be hard for the kids and extremely hard for Nancy. Linda has neglected Nancy and not held up her end of the bargain," etc. Maria says that she's committed to her decision. My dad gives one bit of advice that will wind up being very important. "Well then, don't just give her the money to get a current on her mortgage. She'll fall behind again soon enough. The house will still get foreclosed on, and you'll be out of the money you gave her. Buy the mortgage from the bank, and instead just charge Linda rent. That way, you've at least got something for your money." In early 1994, we move out of the addition. By early 1996, Maria rings my dad up. She did indeed buy the mortgage from the bank and now owns the property outright. Linda swore up and down that she would pay rent, but lo and behold, she hasn't paid any rent over the last 2 years. Maria asked if my dad would be interested in buying the property from her. It was a bit of a stretch since he was paying for 2 homes, his and the one I lived in with my mum and sister. But he put together the money and soon enough we owned the property in question. At this point, Linda is in touch with my dad and is no longer extremely nasty and threatening to him. She's as sweet as can be, promising that she will pay him rent and be a great tenant. My dad says, "That's fine, you can rent the house, but if you miss a payment, I will begin eviction proceedings immediately." They drew up a contract, signed it, and I think she made 2 rent payments before calling up and asking for more time. He told her, "I'm sorry Linda, but if you don't have the money in my hands by the due date spelled out in the contract, I am going to evict you." The date came and went. The money never showed up, and my dad gleefully began eviction proceedings. They knew my dad meant business and moved out on their own before the sheriff did it for them. We owned the house as a rental property for several years, using the income to fund my mum's medical care. Despite being separated since 1990, my parents stayed married until 2002, so that my mum would have health insurance. My dad gave the house to my mum in the divorce settlement, and it was sold to pay for her care in a nursing facility, where she lived from 2000 until her death in 2009. That was really nice of the dad to do, so I hope he's still doing really well. I found this on Quora, and I thought it was too good not to post here. Original question: if a coworker is stealing your food and you address the problem by putting something in it that makes the thief sick, can you be prosecuted for that? What if you put your name on it and leave a "do not eat" note? Many years ago, the early 70s, my dad came home complaining that someone was drinking the iced sweet tea he took for lunch. He's getting ready to eat and half would be gone. He didn't know if they were using a cup or drinking straight from the thermos, and considering the group he worked with, he wasn't going to take any risks. This left him with only water for lunch. This happened several times, and he finally decided to do something about it. He went to the pharmacy and asked for the strongest laxative they had. The pharmacist asked why he wanted one that strong, and my dad explained the situation. The pharmacist, an older gentleman that had been running the store most of his life, told my dad that it was a bad idea, since it could cause dehydration and other problems. Instead, he handed my dad a bottle labelled Essence of Peppermint, and told him to use the entire bottle in the thermos. He also told my dad that if anyone asked what was in the tea, to just say, "Don't worry about it." This was truthful. He said that drinking the entire bottle would only settle your stomach if you had indigestion, and nothing more. The next day, he took the spiked tea to work. Sure enough, at lunch, he found the spiked tea had been tapped again. He recapped it, remarked that he'd soon know who took the tea and finished his lunch. A few minutes later, a coworker came to him holding his stomach, demanding to know what was in the tea. He just said, Don't worry about it. Shortly after that, the co-worker left work sick. Soon, his wife called and asked my dad what was in the tea. Her husband was moaning that he was in pain and had been poisoned. My dad told her what was in it, and told her to call up the pharmacist to verify that it was harmless. She was laughing too hard to even say goodbye as she hung up the phone. Hey everyone, I hope you're all having a really good day and that you enjoyed that video. If you want to check out some other videos, then click on screen right now or check out the playlist down below. If you enjoyed that video, then please do leave a like on it and subscribe if you aren't already, but thank you so much for watching and I'll see you very soon.